Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 206, Unlocking Your Potential, Defeating Self-Sabotage and Embracing Your Life. Well, welcome back to this month, which has been focused on one of the biggest things that I think we often need to work on, and that is anxiety. Last week, we talked about trauma's influence on anxiety later in life and how it makes it hard for us to be authentic. Well, we continue the theme this week as we wrap up the month by getting into a part of anxiety that many people struggle with, yet are ashamed to look at or talk about, and that is self-sabotage. You know, the subtle and sometimes invisible ways that you get in your own way and create obstacles that make it hard for you to reach your goals, therefore making it hard for you to feel good about yourself. Now, there are a million ways that we can do this, of course. And today we're going to tap into some of them and also why we may struggle with it. If you do struggle with this, please be compassionate with yourself, because if you tend to throw monkey wrenches into the best laid plans, you came by this honestly, there are valid reasons, it's not your fault, and you can change it. All right, so what do we mean by self-sabotage? So in the context of anxiety, self-sabotage involves engaging in behaviors that, here we go, intensify or prolong our feelings of anxiety despite the desire to reduce or overcome it. So let's say you have this ongoing anxiety about not going after something or making something happen or doing something good for yourself. And so what do? You sabotage the crap out of it so you don't get there, so therefore you compound your anxiety. It sounds crazy when you say it out loud. It's like, why would we do this? But it is what happens. Because self-sabotage then creates a cycle where anxiety triggers self-defeating behaviors. That leads to increased anxiety and reinforcing the pattern. So, again, there are a million different ways this can play out, but let's look at some common patterns and behaviors of self-sabotage to give you a sense of what we're talking about. The first one, the most obvious one, procrastination. Delaying or avoiding important things you have to do, often due to fear of failure. We've talked about that before. Perfectionism, or just feeling overwhelmed. You don't even know where to start. You might miss this when you're just so busy getting other things done too. Boy, that's a big one. You just piled someone else's stuff on your plate or something easier to manage. So you're so busy getting other things done, you don't do the things or tackle the things you said you needed to do. I mean, it's amazing how appealing cleaning out the fridge looks when we have something we don't want to do or face. We will find something. It is a coping skill, and it is deeply rooted and compulsive. So you're going to do this stuff before you realize you're doing it. The other one is negative self-talk. Doing all that self-criticism, self-doubt, negative thinking patterns that reinforce anxiety and undermine your self-confidence. It's all fear. It's that fear of failing. It's the fear of not knowing how to do it well. It's the fear of being disappointed. It's who do you think you are? It's the imposter syndrome stuff. And so if you talk yourself out of it, think of the payoff. Now you don't have to do it. Now you don't have to risk. And if you have any history of when you took a risk and it went badly, oh boy, you're going to want to play it safe. Self-isolation. Here's one thing that people don't talk about enough. Like withdrawing from social interactions, you're avoiding social events or opportunities for connection. Because guess what? They're going to ask you, how's that thing going? And you don't want to deal with the judgment or the rejection or the discomfort. You are afraid you will feel, and then afraid you can't deal with, which is not true. You might feel uncomfortable, but you can deal with it. I love this one. Comfort zone preservation. Avoiding stepping out of your comfort zone, avoiding new experiences, not taking risks because you want to avoid potential failure or discomfort, like we just talked about. You're preserving that. you're going to find yourself rationalizing the hell out of it too. All these fabulous reasons why you can't. Here's a big one. Self-handicapping. Engaging in behaviors that intentionally undermine your performance or success, like procrastinating right before an important event or not putting in the full effort. So guess what? Potential failure can be attributed to external factors, not your own stuff on the inside. That's why this stuff is so sneaky and insidious. And I don't care how many things or people or situations we want to blame on the outside. A big part of changing this is taking ownership. We'll get into that later today. All right, so self-sabotaging relationships. Engaging in patterns of unhealthy relationships, like staying in toxic ones. Choosing partners or friends who are emotionally unavailable. Or sabotaging relationships due to fear of intimacy. So you can do that too. You can blow it up by pushing people away or making it so difficult to deal with you so that you don't let them in and you don't get hurt. Boy, this is a big one and enough for its own episode. But I just want you to look around today and who's around you and what are you doing in those relationships? And do those relationships support what you need for yourself? You engaging in excessive use of substances or like emotional eating, excessive spending, or any other kind of self-destructive behavior. It allows you to temporarily escape and numb uncomfortable emotions. But it also really sets you back. Perfectionism, one we've been talking about lately, setting impossibly high standards, fearing mistakes, feeling inadequate. All this can lead to avoidance or self-sabotage to avoid potential failure. That's why we're taught to create goals that are reachable and manageable. We can actually get started on them. People-pleasing, especially excessive people-pleasing. Here's where you're going to sacrifice your personal needs, your boundaries, and your values, perhaps, to try to get approval or avoid conflict, or both. So guess what? That's often going to be at the expense of what you need to do for yourself. So you can look outside of yourself for somewhere to focus because you're scared. That's normal, but it's good to be aware of it. And then, of course, there's avoidance, where you just avoid challenging or anxiety-provoking situations altogether. Well, that's really going to limit your personal growth, and it's just going to reinforce the anxiety in the long run. No one reduces anxiety holding up in their home, and no one starts out agoraphobic. They start out by limiting their life out there bit by bit until they're home, and then they're afraid to even go out. Anxiety will feed upon itself. Because we're avoiding discomfort, we create discomfort. There's that temporary relief, but by avoiding and challenging situations, growth opportunities, or necessary actions, the anxiety is going to intensify. Because here's the thing that no one talks about. If you're not taking care of things or moving yourself forward, that will catch up with you. It always does. If you're afraid to go to the gym because of what people will think, what's going to happen to your health? If you're afraid to ask for a promotion, what's going to happen to you financially and just even mentally? Are you going to be happy in your work? Lack of self-trust and confidence. So when we do this stuff, even though we don't want to do this stuff, to sabotage the crap out of what we say we really want, guess what happens? It's going to hurt our self-trust and tank our confidence, which in turn is going to make it harder to face anxiety-provoking situations. So you're perpetuating the cycle, and you're making it even harder as you go. Okay, so that gives you a sense of some of the sneaky ways that we self-sabotage. We hurt ourselves. So why do we do this? If it doesn't make any sense, why the hell do we do it, right? Well, you know where I'm going to go, childhood experiences, because they really impact the development of self-sabotaging behaviors in adulthood. Here are some ways that happen. Some are pretty obvious, and you may already know all of these, and that's fine. I just want you to kind of think back as you listen to these and see if anything resonates. Critical parenting. Growing up with overly critical or perfectionistic parents who are anxious, right? who consistently pointed out your flaws or mistakes can really lead to and create a harsh inner critic and a big fear of failure. So guess what? That's going to result in self-sabotaging behaviors because you are going to want to avoid judgment, failure, and disappointment. You didn't want to disappoint them, and as an adult, you don't want to disappoint yourself. Trauma and neglect mean there can be direct correlations here or very indirect impacts. Childhood trauma, abuse, or neglect can really undermine a child's sense of safety, trust, and self-worth. These experiences can manifest in self-sabotage in a way to protect themselves from potential harm and help them maintain a false sense of control. Because they think they're avoiding being re-traumatized, and that makes perfect sense. Touch a hot stove once. But it's actually harming them in the long run. Lack of emotional validation when you were a kid. So when your emotions were dismissed, maybe ignored, or invalidated, or shamed during childhood, you're going to internalize the belief, even if you're not aware of this, that your emotions are not important or valid. Well, this is going to create a lot of difficulty in expressing your emotions. It's going to create a lot of self-doubt and a tendency to sabotage yourself to avoid vulnerability. That's what this sabotaging is all about. If you grew up with high expectations and pressure, growing up in an environment with excessively high expectations and pressure to achieve can really create an intense fear of failure, of course. The fear of not meeting those expectations can lead to self-sabotage as a way to protect yourself from failure or rejection, lack of approval, lack of love. Biologically, that's kind of built in. We need those to survive, and we know that. Another one is inconsistent or unpredictable parenting. So inconsistency in the parenting styles, unpredictable environments, the chaos, unstable relationships can really create a sense of insecurity and fear in a kid. Well, guess what? These experiences can lead to you self-sabotaging as a means of maintaining control, avoiding disappointment, or anticipating rejection. Because when so much was going on so crazy out of your control, even if it wasn't every day, in fact, it's worse when it isn't every day because you never know when it's going to happen, so it sets up the eggshells on the floor, you're going to want some kind of control as a kid. Boundary blurs are next. Enmeshment or overprotection. Being raised in an enmeshed or overprotective environment can hinder the development of your autonomy and your self-confidence. Because you're going to fear making your own decisions, taking risks, or asserting your independence. Because you never got a chance to try it out. You were supposed to developmentally over the years be able to do bigger and badder things and see what you could handle and experientially learn how to do and build confidence in yourself. Well, if they proverbially tied your shoes for you and gave you the meta message like, yeah, we don't really think you can do that, how are you going to feel confident and trust yourself? There aren't boundaries. Enmeshment means there aren't boundaries between where the parent ends and the child begins. And when the child is old enough to start choosing for themselves, the parent was supposed to let them do that. But the parent's anxiety couldn't let them do that. The other thing that can happen is a little bit of learned helplessness. And sometimes this can really look like entitlement or someone being spoiled. But growing up in an environment where problem-solving skills or self-efficacy were not nurtured can really contribute to learned helplessness. So this can manifest as a belief that you have little control over your life as a kid, leading to a lot of self-sabotage as a way to confirm this learned helplessness. So there was not the environment where people modeled nor encouraged you to problem solve and figure things out, and they were there to love and support you through it. So you kind of had this vacuum, and probably with parents who were so anxious that they couldn't even make decisions either, or they made it so awful of a process and just stirred up the whole family with it, and there was lots of fighting and people stressed out. Maybe people checking out over it, numbing out over it. So you didn't learn how to problem solve. You didn't learn how to do that process and figure out where your strengths are and what you need to work on. So what are you going to do? Say, F it. I'm not going to do any of it. I'm just going to sit here and poor me. I can't do anything. That also goes hand in hand with other focus, like, I can't believe these people and it's all their fault and I didn't do anything wrong. So all of it is a lack of internal locus of control, a lack of personal responsibility, which is why we talk about responsibility a lot on this show. All right, so there are a whole bunch of other ways that your childhood and early learning could have impacted your efficacy, your belief in yourself, that you could problem solve and get things done. If any of that resonated with you, my encouragement is to get some help around healing some of that and changing those distortions. Distortions meaning how you look at yourself in the mirror. It's a distorted image right now if you're self-sabotaging. Self-sabotaging is all about fear. How do I protect myself from being vulnerable, therefore being disappointed? What if I fail? I don't know if I can handle that. That is why I'm a big believer in healthy emotional support if you're trying to work on and change some of this stuff. You need people who have your back, who aren't going to judge you if you, sabotaged again. And that's okay. They're going to help you get back on the horse and stay there. We need to know that we're not going to be abandoned emotionally if we screw up. We need to know that we have people who are going to pull us up off the ground and help us walk forward. Remember, all the fears of vulnerability growing up that caused a lot of this tendency to sabotage is all fear of lack of parental love, approval, guidance, boundaries, safety. As an adult, you can create your own safety within yourself, and if you're very choosy about your environments. With self-awareness, maybe some trauma work, some coaching and support, you can identify and overcome self-sabotaging patterns. You can heal those old wounds, and you can create healthier ways of relating to your life that you can feel good about. All right, so how do you start tackling some of this? Well, if you need healing, get healing. Go to therapy. If you've done a lot of that, but you still have some of these behaviors, get a coach. Join our Facebook group. We talk all about this stuff. The first thing you want to do once you've grabbed some support is you want to start noticing. Just start noticing as you go through your day. Try to be neutral about it, please. Don't add a bunch of shame and yuck to it. That's going to put you right back in the box. Because you can't shame yourself into good things. You know that. So just note that when you're doing things that aren't in alignment with your goals, bring some humor, be a smartass about it. I don't care what you do. But just notice like, look at that. I just found 3 things to do that I usually hate to do because I can't pick up the phone and make that difficult phone call. I'm afraid of what that's going to be like. Number 2, look at your fears and embrace them. Come on, they make sense. Putting off that phone call that could just possibly get you a great job. Well, look at your fear of screwing that up maybe. Or even the job for that matter. Maybe you need some coaching around this so you can determine what is BS and what's valid here. In other words, this particular job promotion, maybe you aren't ready for it. Maybe you'll be ready next year. Or maybe you are, but you have so much imposter syndrome fear that's irrational that you're afraid you're going to screw it up. That's why you need safe people to help guide you through this. You know what is fact and what is fiction. 3, find babier steps, tinier steps. Break it down even further then. Start where you can. Where's the low-hanging fruit? I ask clients this all the time. What can you see yourself doing? Just start somewhere. It's going to beget more change. Get support and accountability too. Don't do this in a vacuum. You know what's going to happen. You're going to sabotage that too. We have to share with safe people, again, who aren't going to judge us, who are just going to keep cheering us on. But we also need to share our successes like, hey, I did that first thing. That feels good. And you need to hear that reinforcing, oh, good for you. Keep going. I know that was hard. Keep going. You can do the next thing. We're just retraining our brain is all we're doing. So start where you can, get support, because old patterns take work. They take work and determination to change. And we're better off doing small things to start because, like we've talked about here, it's going to motivate you to do even more. So I don't care where you start, but start. Now be careful here. Don't start 1,000 miles away from where you want to be though, right? Do one small thing in the area that you want to change. If you want to get healthier, do one small diet change this week. See how it goes. See how you feel. When you say that stuff to yourself, like, I'm just going to see how this goes. What happens, I think, in that moment is, guess what? You just grab some healthy power back. Because you've decided you're going to play this out, see if you can do it. Can you not eat ice cream this week? You have to try it out and see. But when you get that data back, you get to choose whether you want to continue making changes or not. All the stuff we've talked about thus far on this episode, conversely, is all fear-based. And it's all focused out there on all the unknowns. And what about them? And what if they're going to reject me? And what if I fail? What if they think I'm a failure? So keep bringing it back to yourself and say, I'm just going to try some things and I'm going to see how it goes. And then when I get there, I'm going to decide. You just got out of your fight or flight part of your brain and you got into your thinking brain where it's logical and you lowered your anxiety and you started to build a little confidence just by doing that. I'm going to see how this goes. I'm not going to stay in my box and pretend I know everything that's going to happen if I step out of it, because you don't. So we can embrace our fears, but we can also make some choices. And guess what? You get to change those choices. What if you decide, I don't want to give up ice cream altogether. I just don't want to eat it every night. Well, fine. You made a choice. And you can try that out for a month. And you can see how that goes. So the other piece that I think that happens in that is, okay, so we are also in reality. And deep down, we know that if we're doing something that's realistic and more manageable, come on, it's going to make it so much easier to go after it. You don't want to be fighting yourself anymore. So in this episode, we dove into the topic of self-sabotage, how it's all fear-based, and therefore connected to anxiety. Now, self-sabotage, we talked about, means the behaviors, the thoughts, and the actions that actually undermine our goals, undermine our well-being, and get in the way of success, whatever success we're thinking about. We explored the common patterns of self-sabotage, like perfectionism and procrastination, and doing everything but what you're supposed to be doing. And then we started to talk about strategies to break free from these self-defeating behaviors. I hope this knowledge will help you to unlock your potential. Be stronger than your fear. Defeat the self-sabotage. And embrace the normal anxiety with a renewed sense of empowerment. You can do this. You can make choices. You can figure it out. If you want some more help around that, join the Facebook group in the show notes. Sign up for the Facebook Lives. I'm doing them every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. They're about a half an hour. Great group of people who really want to grow and learn. It's a safe place where we can talk about all of this stuff. If you need more information around that, just hit me up on social or email me, and I'd be happy to walk through some things with you. All right. Thank you so much for being here today. You're here because you want to work on yourself. If you don't already get the newsletter, make sure you sign up at ownitpowercast.com. That's got some great stuff in it that comes out every Tuesday. I don't blow up your inbox. I put everything in there for you. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.